The door creaked open, and I froze in my tracks. A chill ran down my spine, but it wasn't the cool evening air. It was that envelope, the one I had stumbled across just an hour ago. My name was written on it, but not in Sophie's usual neat handwriting. This was hurried, almost panicked. Inside was a bank statement that made my stomach turn. I didn't want to believe it. My voice low and trembling. But the numbers don't lie. $20,000. Gone. All while I thought we were saving for a life together. I clutched the paper tighter, my fingers digging into its edges as my mind races. The pit in my stomach grows heavier as I march toward the living room, where Sophie is lounging on the couch, her phone glowing faintly in her hands. She doesn't even look up at first, just smiles faintly, as if nothing is wrong. I slam the paper onto the coffee table in front of her. "Explain this," I demand. My voice cracks, a mixture of rage and betrayal. Her eyes widen, darting from the paper to my face. "What is this?" she stammers, feigning ignorance. "You know exactly what this is," I shout, my voice echoing off the walls. "How long has this been going on, Sophie?" While I was working overtime, cutting corners, eating ramen noodles just to save for us, you were emptying the account. Her expression changes, confusion giving way to defiance. "Don't raise your voice at me," she says, her tone sharp. I can explain, but she doesn't. Instead, she grabs her phone, clutching it like a lifeline, her thumb hovering nervously over the screen. I snatch it from her hand before she can react. The screen flashes to life, and my heart sinks. Messages. Hundreds of them. Her name, her account number, her plans. My world feels like it's crashing down as I scroll through her conversations with someone named Angela. "You were planning to leave me?" I ask, my voice quieter now, but no less sharp. "All that money, Sophie, was it for this?" She doesn't answer, but the look in her eyes says it all. Guilt, fear, and something I hadn't seen before, calculation. Before we continue, we notice that over 80% of our viewers haven't subscribed to the channel. If you're enjoying this content, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications to stay updated on our latest stories. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Her eyes betrayed her. That look of calculation, it wasn't something I could unsee. It was as if the woman I'd spent years with had been wearing a mask all along. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words were stuck in my throat, suffocating me. I sank onto the edge of the coffee table, the paper crumpled in my hand. "I trusted you, Sophie," I whispered, my voice trembling. "How could you do this to me? To us?" She sighed, crossing her arms, her defiance softening just enough to reveal the cracks in her armor. "You don't understand, Ethan," she said, her voice quieter now. "You were so focused on saving for the future, but what about me? What about what I wanted?" I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about? Everything I've done was for us. The overtime shifts, the sacrifices. I thought we were building a life together." Sophie didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked past me, as if searching for an escape route in her mind. Her silence was louder than any words she could have spoken. My thoughts drifted, unbidden, to the beginning. We were happy once, weren't we? I remembered the first time I saw Sophie. It was at a mutual friend's barbecue. She stood out, not because she was the loudest or the most outgoing, but because of the way she carried herself. Confident, poised, and with a laugh that made everyone else laugh along. "She's out of your league," Jake had teased me, nudging my elbow as I stole glances at her across the yard. But by the end of the night, Sophie and I were huddled in the corner, talking about everything and nothing until the stars came out. Those early days were electric. We'd spend hours on the phone, planning our future like two kids with the whole world ahead of them. She wanted a house with a garden. I wanted a place with a view. We compromised on the idea of both. When we moved in together, everything felt perfect. We had our inside jokes, our late-night kitchen dance parties, our lazy Sunday mornings. Sure, we had our differences. She liked to splurge on little luxuries, while I was more practical. But back then, it felt like those differences balanced us out. I shook my head, snapping back to the present. "You used to care about those dreams," I said, my voice firmer now. "The garden, The house. We were saving for us, Sophie. What changed? She hesitated, fiddling with the edge of her sweater. Maybe I just woke up, she said, her words cold and deliberate. I realized I couldn't live the rest of my life pinching pennies, waiting for some far-off future that might never come. Her words hit me like a slap. That's not fair, I shot back. You didn't have to wait. I was building something real, something solid for us. You didn't need to lie to me. You didn't need to steal. Steal? She repeated, her tone defensive. I didn't steal anything. That money was ours. I just took control of it before it disappeared into one of your long-term plans. Her words were like gasoline on a fire. Control? I stood up, the heat rising in my chest. You mean lying behind my back and draining the account? That's not control, Sophie. That's betrayal. She flinched, but her defiance returned quickly. You'll never understand, she muttered, looking away again. I thought back to the smaller moments that seemed insignificant at the time but now felt like flashing red flags. Like the time she insisted on managing the household bills, saying it would make things easier. Or when she started buying expensive clothes and accessories, claiming they were gifts from friends or bought on sale. Then there was the night I came home late from work and found her on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. When I asked who it was, she said it was Angela, her friend from college. But something about the way she rushed to end the call didn't sit right with me. I didn't press her then. I trusted her. God, I was a fool. I gave you everything, Sophie, I said, my voice breaking. I trusted you with my life, my future. And all this time, you were planning to leave? Her face softened for a moment, a flicker of regret crossing her features. But it was gone as quickly as it came. I didn't want it to end like this, she said quietly. But you didn't give me a choice. I couldn't keep living like this, Ethan. Always planning, never living. Her words stung. That's not what this was, I argued. This wasn't about me holding you back. This was about you wanting something more and not having the courage to tell me. Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. For the first time, I wondered if I had ever truly known her. I stood there, staring at the woman I had built my life around, and felt like a stranger in my own home. All the memories we'd built together, were they real? Or had I been living in a lie this whole time? Her voice interrupted my thoughts. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said, barely above a whisper. I thought I could fix it before you found out. Fix it? I repeated, laughing bitterly. You think this can be fixed? I stepped back, my head spinning. I needed air. I needed space. But more than anything, I needed answers. Why, Sophie? I asked, my voice breaking. Why wasn't I enough? She didn't answer. And in that silence, I realized that maybe I didn't want to hear the truth. The truth didn't matter anymore, did it? The damage was already done. But as I turned to leave the room, something stopped me. A thought that crept in and gripped me like a vice. There was more to this. It wasn't just about the money. It couldn't be. I walked to the kitchen, my mind racing. My hands moved on their own, fumbling with the coffee machine. But I wasn't thirsty. I just needed something to focus on, something to stop the spiral of questions spinning out of control in my head. I heard Sophie move behind me. Her footsteps were soft, hesitant, like she didn't want to draw attention to herself. But I could feel her watching me, waiting to see what I would do next. I glanced over my shoulder. What aren't you telling me? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She flinched but didn't respond. Don't play dumb, Sophie. There's more, isn't there? I set the coffee mug down with a loud clink. You don't just siphon off $20,000 without a plan. So, what is it? What's your endgame? Her lips parted as if to speak, but then she pressed them into a thin line. Her silence spoke louder than words. I couldn't just stand there. I stormed back into the living room, grabbing her phone off the couch where I'd left it. Let's see what else you've been hiding, I muttered, more to myself than to her. Ethan, stop, she shouted, lunging for the phone, but I sidestepped her easily. You lost the right to tell me what to do the moment you decided to betray me, I snapped, scrolling through her messages. My fingers trembled, partly from anger, partly from dread. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I'd find it. And I did. There it was, a thread of messages with Angela. At first glance, they seemed innocent, two friends chatting about mundane things. But as I scrolled further, the tone shifted. My chest tightened as I reread the last message. "I'll be long gone by then," I murmured under my breath. I looked up at Sophie, who was frozen in place, her face pale. "So, that's it, huh?" I said, my voice eerily calm. "You weren't just planning to leave, you were planning to disappear. Where were you going, Sophie? And don't even think about lying." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, like she was struggling to find the right words. Finally, she said, "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like you were planning to run off with my money and never look back." Her facade cracked then. She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't know what else to do," she said, her voice muffled. You have no idea how trapped I felt." "Trapped?" I repeated, incredulous. "Trapped in what, Sophie? A relationship with someone who loved you? Who would have done anything for you? Please, enlighten me." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "You don't get it, Ethan. You're so predictable, so safe. I needed more. I needed excitement, freedom, a life that wasn't just this." Her words hit me like a freight train. I felt the air leave my lungs as the weight of her betrayal settled in my chest. "So, you decided to destroy the life we built together because you were bored?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head, but I couldn't hear whatever excuse she tried to offer. My thoughts were louder. I stood there, the phone still in my hand, staring at the messages as if they held all the answers. But they only raised more questions. Angela had to be more involved than Sophie was letting on. There was something about those messages, about the urgency, the way Angela seemed to be pushing Sophie, that didn't sit right with me. "Who is Angela, really?" I asked, turning the phone toward her. "Why is she so invested in this?" Sophie hesitated, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "She's just a friend," she said weakly. "Bullshit," I shot back. "Friends don't help you plan an escape with 20 grand of stolen money. Tell me the truth, Sophie. Who is she?" She didn't answer, but her silence was answer enough. My mind went into overdrive. How deep did this go? Was Sophie the mastermind, or was Angela the one pulling the strings? The thought that someone else might have been orchestrating this betrayal made my skin crawl. I needed to know more, and I wasn't going to get it from Sophie, not willingly anyway. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Sophie called after me, panic creeping into her voice. "To find the truth," I said without turning around. "Because it's clear I'm not going to get it from you." I slammed the door behind me, my footsteps heavy as I headed to my car. The night was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that felt suffocating. I didn't have a concrete plan, but I didn't need one. All I knew was that I had to act fast. Whatever Sophie was plotting, she wouldn't wait around for long now that she knew I was onto her. As I gripped the steering wheel, my mind raced. Angela. She was the key to this. Sophie might have been the one to drain the account, but Angela was the one who pushed her, guided her. I scrolled through Sophie's messages again, noting the location mentioned in one of Angela's texts, the warehouse district. It was a vague lead, but it was all I had. The streets blurred as I drove, my heart pounding in my chest. Every turn of the wheel felt like I was inching closer to the truth, and further from the life I thought I knew. When I reached the address, I parked a block away and killed the engine. The building was as nondescript as they came, a gray, crumbling structure with dim light spilling out from a single window on the second floor. I hesitated, my fingers tapping against the steering wheel. This was insane. Confronting Sophie had been one thing, but walking into a situation I knew nothing about? That was something else entirely. But then I thought of the money, of the betrayal, of all the sacrifices I'd made for someone who hadn't hesitated to rip my life apart. No, I wasn't turning back. I crept toward the building, my footsteps muffled against the damp concrete. The door wasn't locked, and it groaned in protest as I pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of dust and oil. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, and I spotted a staircase in the corner. The voices drifted down from above, muffled but unmistakably tense. I took the steps 2 at a time, my hand gripping the railing so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I reached the landing, I hesitated, pressing my ear against the door. "You need to hurry up," a voice hissed. Angela's, I assumed. "He's not stupid, Sophie. He'll figure it out." "He already has," Sophie replied, her voice shaky. "I told you, this isn't going to work anymore. He knows too much." Angela laughed coldly. "And what's he going to do? Cry about it? We have the money, Sophie. That's all that matters." I felt the blood rush to my ears. My fists clenched as anger coursed through me. They thought they'd already won. I kicked the door open. The sound of the wood splintering made both women jump. Angela's chair toppled over as she scrambled to her feet, and Sophie gasped, her eyes wide with panic. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice echoing through the room. My gaze darted between the two of them, taking in the stack of papers on the table, the laptop still displaying a bank transfer screen. Angela recovered quickly, her expression hardening. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, stepping in front of Sophie as if to shield her. Clearly, I shot back, stepping closer. "But here I am. So why don't you tell me what the plan is, Angela? Or should I just call the cops and let them figure it out?" Angela smirked, her confidence grating against my nerves. "You think you're in control here?" she asked. "You have no idea what you've walked into." I didn't flinch. "Try me." Angela's smirk faltered as I took another step forward. I grabbed the stack of papers off the table, scanning the documents. Offshore accounts, fake IDs, plane tickets. My stomach churned. "You were really going to run, weren't you?" I asked, my voice low. "Not just leave me, disappear completely." Sophie spoke up then, her voice trembling. "It wasn't supposed to be like this, Ethan. I didn't want you to find out this way." "Find out what, Sophie?" I snapped, slamming the papers onto the table. "That you were going to leave me with nothing? That you were going to take everything we built and walk away without so much as a goodbye?" She opened her mouth to reply, but Angela cut her off. "Enough of this," she said sharply. "We don't owe him an explanation." I turned to Angela, my anger boiling over. "You," I said, pointing at her. "You did this. You pushed her into this." Angela laughed. "Oh, please. Sophie's a big girl. She made her own decisions. She came to me, remember? She wanted out. I just helped her make it happen. I didn't think. I moved." In a flash, I lunged at the laptop, yanking the power cord from the wall. Angela screamed, but I didn't stop. I grabbed the stack of papers and threw them onto the floor, scattering them in every direction. "What the hell are you doing?" Angela shouted, trying to shove me away. "I'm taking back what's mine," I growled, grabbing the laptop and heading for the door. "You can't just walk out of here." Angela yelled after me. "We'll find you." "Good luck with that," I said over my shoulder. Sophie's voice stopped me in my tracks. "Ethan, wait, please." I turned to face her, my heart aching despite everything. "You made your choice, Sophie," I said quietly. "Now live with it." And then I walked out, leaving them behind. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but it did nothing to calm the storm raging inside me. My hands were trembling as I clutched the laptop, the edges pressing into my palms. Every step I took away from that warehouse felt heavier than the last. The weight of what had just happened was suffocating. I wanted to feel triumphant, to believe I'd won by taking back control. But all I felt was exhaustion, bone-deep exhaustion that came from realizing just how thoroughly I'd been betrayed. When I got home, the silence was deafening. The house was exactly as I'd left it, but it felt different now, emptier somehow. I set the laptop down on the kitchen counter and collapsed into a chair, my head in my hands. I tried to replay the night's events in my mind, but everything blurred together. The shouting, the accusations, Sophie's trembling voice, Angela's smug expression. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I opened the laptop, staring at the login screen. Part of me wanted to see everything. to know exactly what Sophie and Angela had planned, to piece together every detail of their betrayal. But another part of me couldn't handle it. Did I really want to dig deeper into this mess? After a long moment, I closed the laptop. The next few days were a blur. I called my bank first thing in the morning, explaining the situation. They froze the account immediately, but the damage was already done. Most of the money was gone. "You'll need to file a police report," the bank representative said, her voice professional but distant. "With this amount, it's considered a serious offense." A police report. The thought made my stomach churn. Did I really want to drag Sophie through that? Did I want to go through it myself? But then I thought of all the sacrifices I'd made, all the trust I'd put in her. I couldn't let her get away with this, not without consequences. Filing the report was surreal. Sitting in the police station, recounting every detail to an officer who barely looked up from his notepad, made the betrayal feel even more real. "You said this was a joint account?" the officer asked, his tone neutral. "Yes, but I didn't authorize her to take the money," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded, scribbling something down. "And you believe she planned to leave the country with it?" I hesitated, the image of those plane tickets flashing in my mind. "Yes," I said finally. "That was the plan." The days turned into weeks, and the fallout spread like ripples in a pond. Word got out about what had happened. Small towns love their gossip, after all. Everywhere I went, I felt the weight of people's stares, their whispers. "Did you hear about Ethan and Sophie? I can't believe she'd do something like that. Poor guy. He didn't deserve this." I hated the pity. I hated the way people looked at me like I was some kind of tragic figure. Jake was the only one who didn't treat me differently. He showed up one night with a six-pack of beer and sat down across from me at the kitchen table. "So," he said, cracking open a can, "what's next?" I shrugged, staring at the condensation on my own can. "I don't know. Move on, I guess." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Move on how?" "Because if you're planning to sit here and wallow, I'm not letting that happen." I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, hollow sound. "I don't even know where to start, Jake. She took everything." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "She didn't take everything. You're still here. You still have a job, a home, people who care about you. Don't let her take more than she already has." His words stuck with me. Over the next few weeks, I started to rebuild, not just my finances, but my sense of self. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts to make up for the money I'd lost. It wasn't easy, but it felt good to take back control of my life, one paycheck at a time. I also reconnected with old friends, people I drifted away from during my relationship with Sophie. They welcomed me back with open arms, reminding me that I wasn't alone. One evening, as I was sorting through the mess Sophie had left behind, I found an old photo of us. We were at the beach, smiling and carefree, the sun setting behind us. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, a reminder of what could have been. But then I looked closer. Even in the photo, there was something distant about her smile, something I hadn't noticed before. I set the photo down, feeling a strange sense of relief. "She's not my problem anymore," I said to myself. The final step in my journey was closing the chapter for good. I sold the house we'd shared, using the money to pay off debts and start fresh. On moving day, as I locked the door for the last time, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This was my chance to start over, to build a life that was mine and mine alone. As I drove away, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't overpowering. It wasn't the kind of overwhelming joy people describe when they finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. No, this was quieter, subtler, like the first warmth of spring after a brutal winter. The road stretched out ahead of me, open and full of possibilities. I didn't know exactly where it would lead, but for the first time, I didn't feel the need to plan every step. For so long, my life had been about goals, savings, the next milestone. Now, it was just about moving forward. The first few weeks in my new apartment felt strange. It wasn't the home Sophie and I had dreamed of, but it was mine. The furniture didn't match, the walls were bare, and the place had a faint smell of paint that refused to go away, but it was a fresh start. I spent my evenings unpacking slowly, going through the few things I'd decided to keep. One night, I came across a box of old journals, ones I hadn't touched since long before Sophie and I met. Flipping through the pages, I found pieces of myself I'd forgotten, dreams I'd set aside, hobbies I'd abandoned. I laughed as I read one entry about wanting to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. It felt like a lifetime ago, but the idea still sparked something in me. Work became less about just making money and more about rediscovering my passion. I took on projects I actually cared about, poured myself into the work with a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. It was about rebuilding for myself. One day, my manager pulled me aside. "I've noticed a change in you lately," she said, a small smile on her face. "In a good way. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." Her words stuck with me. I was changing, little by little, becoming someone I actually liked. The biggest shift came when I started reconnecting with the people I'd pushed away during my relationship with Sophie. It wasn't easy at first. Some friendships had grown distant, and I wasn't sure if they could be mended. But one by one, they welcomed me back. Jake was the first, of course, always there with his blunt honesty and unwavering support. Then came Anna, who I hadn't seen since Sophie and I got serious. She greeted me with a hug and a knowing smile. "You look lighter," she said over coffee one afternoon. "Lighter?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," she said, stirring her latte. "Like you've finally let go of something that was weighing you down." I thought about her words long after we parted ways. Maybe she was right. One evening, I found myself scrolling through social media, a habit I tried to avoid. My thumb paused over Sophie's profile, but I hesitated. What would I even gain from looking? Answers? Closure? No. I didn't need to know what she was doing, or whether she regretted her choices. Her chapter in my life was closed. I deleted the app instead, feeling a strange sense of relief. That weekend, Jake convinced me to join a hiking group he'd been part of for years. At first, I was reluctant. Group activities weren't exactly my thing, but he was persistent. "Come on, man," he said. "You used to love this kind of stuff. Besides, fresh air will do you good." He was right. The moment my boots hit the trail, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in ages. The crunch of leaves underfoot, the cool breeze on my face, the quiet hum of nature. It was exactly what I needed. As we reached the summit, I stood at the edge of the cliff, looking out over the sprawling valley below. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. This, I thought, is what it feels like to be free. The final piece of my healing came months later, in the form of a letter. It arrived in a plain envelope with no return address. The handwriting was familiar, though, and my stomach churned as I opened it. It was from Sophie. "Ethan, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I needed to say it. I'm sorry. For everything. You didn't deserve what I did to you. I can't undo the past, but I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday." Sophie, I sat there for a long time, staring at the letter. Forgiveness. It wasn't something I could give her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I realized I didn't need her apology to move on. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. It wasn't closure, not entirely, but it was enough to remind me that I was on the right path. The last scene of this chapter in my life came on a random Tuesday morning. I woke up to sunlight streaming through the window, the sound of birds chirping outside. I made myself coffee, sat by the window, and opened a book I hadn't read in years. It wasn't a grand moment. It wasn't dramatic or life-changing, but it was peaceful. It was mine. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I was happy. Truly, deeply happy.